As we sort of keep talking about on Tuesday, it's really sort of all about observation. And the more that you explore your site and the more that you can observe at different times of the day, the more you can sort of start to understand a place. And the more you can understand a place, the more you can sort of start to drill down into what is interesting about a street or an activity or what people are doing. And this was like a little sketch I did a couple of years ago or 3 years ago um, on the corner of Street 19 in Phnom Penh, where a lot of activities occur on the corners, as Vera sort of alluded to. So drawing on location is a really wonderful thing, and it's really a great skill to develop if and practice as well. And the reason it's really great is that it's very low tech. So we're asking you to have your sketchbook and your pens and your eyes and your ears and to go out into the street. And that's a really great thing about drawing in your sketchbook, is that you don't rely on any batteries or any updates or any software. It's just you, pen and paper. The really great thing about drawing is it's incredibly immersive. You can really start to get to know a place if you spend a lot of time there. Some of the Rufus students will recognize this particular place. And that allows you to do a drawing that sort of really starts to talk about lots of things that are happening in the street. Not just the obvious things, but all of the little details that make a place special and make a place unique. Drawing in the studio is relatively easy. You've got a nice table, you've got your sort of cup of tea or whatever it is, cup of coffee, and you've got everything sort of easy there. Drawing in the street is completely different, but the really nice thing about it, and this is probably a little bit different with the COVID lens, is that invariably in my experience, and I've been drawing in the street for like 15, 16, 17 years or so, is that it leads to conversations with local people. And that's how you learn about places, through local people. Through those conversations, you can start to have some really memorable interactions and really start to uncover the layers of a particular place. And how like drawings can actually provoke real memorable interactions with people, with local community members. The more that you look, the more that you understand that what happens during the morning might be incredibly different from what happens during the afternoon, and what might be incredibly different from the evening, and then what might be incredibly different from a weekend versus a weekday. So again, this is why we're asking you to look at various times on your sites. And also understanding how people use space over a period of time. Through drawing, you can sort of start to communicate this idea and how people come and go from particular points on a street and how they might use particular spaces in a different way at different times of the day. I guess as a graphical style, and this is just something I do, we're really interested in you forming your own graphical style from a drawing point of view. I just use two different colors to distinguish people and infrastructure and buildings and architecture in the streets. Because for me, these drawings are all about the people and nothing else. So sometimes when we're in the street, we can see some pretty complicated things, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. And so how do we decide what are the important parts of what we see? You know, for example, this is a sketch. Some of you UNSW students might recognize it. For the Rufus students, it's a train station in Sydney. And I did this sketch on purpose where I drew everything I could possibly see over a half an hour period of time. But I did this sort of with meaning, in that this, for me, this sketch says nothing really. Whereas really the most interesting thing about this particular space is how people came to look at the departures board to sort of see when their next train was. So then the idea of looking and sort of understanding spatial qualities meant that I was able to sort of say, well, actually, the best drawing I could do of this space is just the relationship of people and this information board. So again, the more that you look, the more that you can actually decide what to leave out and what to focus on in your drawing. This is in Nepal, in Kathmandu in Nepal. And rather than drawing everything that I could see, again, I'm just focusing on one particular element, which is the signage. Being sort of playful with composition and sort of, the corners of buildings and the junctions of buildings and how different materials are being used and how people have sort of got a different sort of fence sort of design here, where here there's no fence whatsoever, but then little details of the little plant pots there and little greenery up here. All of this you just get from looking. And if you start to think about what you look at in a series of simple shapes and patterns, it becomes a lot easier to work on location and to draw what you see and to work out what you see. So if you think about things in squares, rectangles, circles, simple lines, and maybe some diagonals, you can really, if you really break down what you see into a series of elements, it can really help you with with drawing on location. Also, this idea of taking a facade here and then just drawing the outline, getting the proportions and the scale of the outline right, enables you to fill in the detail as a process. So don't start from the top here. Draw the big picture first and then infill the details. So you draw the framework and then work in the details. And then so this allows you to sort of really start to think, well, in this sketch here, it's the relationship of the corner, which is derived and demonstrated by this particular materiality here, and shape with the breeze blocks, and how, as Vera alluded to, how like food stalls would just sort of gather on the corners in Phnom Penh. Again, just a really good example of simple shapes. Whilst these drawings have got some perspective to them, they're not flattened elevations, they are very sort of simple in their form. Again, this elevation is really about the relationship of this simple building up here, and then sort of all of the bikes, the people, the umbrellas, and how all of this activity happens underneath the umbrellas. The more you start to understand the place, and we'll talk a little bit about this next week in terms of how you do your post-production, you can sort of start to say, well, the most important part of this sketch is that there is a canopy, and that canopy provides shade and protection for someone to sell coffee. So you highlight the canopy and its relationship with the coffee cart. And then that's all that sketch needs to say. So the types of drawings that we're going to ask you to do are invariably planned section elevation with some sort of small 3D components depending on which theme you're in. But again, if you just think about elevations as a series of simple shapes that you map out from a scale point of view, because we're asking every drawing to be to a scale, or certainly drawn at a scale, and then it will be presented in proportion, obviously a lot smaller, then this will really stand you in good stead for doing the elevation. So these are some past examples from students that have taken on board this particular approach of just simple shapes, adding colour to highlight particular issues or particular elements that are important in their findings of their observations. Again, sort of we're not asking for sort of detailed, measured technical drawings. They're sketches. They're sketches that sort of convey an idea. And we're really keen for you to develop your own style. Again, that idea of just using different colours in a section to talk about how people traverse across a threshold. So this is a street or a footpath. this is the street, this is an internal restaurant, and how people move from this space to this space, and how, because there's a seating area here, and that's located next to a tree, that was a nice place for people to sit. And then how the level change meant that people from here could visually see out above the heads of these people. So you can kind of see how just even from a little simple sketch like that, there's a lot to talk about. Some more examples of sections. Sections are really powerful drawings, and they can convey a lot of information. Also, as part of the process, I think it's really important that you photograph what you see as well, and use that as a reference point. Because sometimes what you photograph might actually disappear or change within a matter of seconds. Again, some other sort of little examples of street corner details in the Phnom Penh context. So, drawing in this way, in this sort of simplified way, allows you to develop an approach that helps you understand place. And the more you understand place, you can start to understand to use drawing as a tool to communicate your ideas. And this is what we're going to where we're going to get to in terms of like the last week of the course when we look at the urban intervention. So just some real practical tips about drawing in the street, because it's very different from drawing in the studio. You know, so this image on the left, I actually couldn't see what I was drawing because I was completely surrounded by people. So sometimes there's a few logistical challenges to deal with. Just finding like a place to sit that's kind of shaded by a canopy and that's away from the noise and the dust of the traffic. Dealing with different weather conditions. Here's a bit of a low-tech sort of solution to drawing in the rain. Drawing it under a shady tree is always really advantageous, but drawing on the street allows you to connect with people and connect with place. We'd just like to request that you, whatever place you choose to draw, that you do that safely, and you are aware of your surroundings when you start drawing. So hopefully you've all printed out your sketchbook. Now this is like a really incredible, vital resource. It's got all of the information in there in terms of your observations, but we would like all of your drawings to be done in your sketchbook or done on trace. So you might do a base drawing in your sketchbook and you might trace over the top of it. If you use trace, then please staple the trace into the pages of your sketchbook. Just some little tips, like I often have like a board that's just a little bit bigger than the sketchbook, and I just have like these little clips that help the wind stop the wind sort of taking it away. Having like a little plastic sleeve just to protect it from the weather. Think about your pens that you want to use, the different line weights that they achieve. Sometimes drawing in a really thick pen can be not what you kind of after from a detail point of view. So whereas, you know, to get all of this detail of this fence in here and these window frames, you can't do that in a thick pen. So little practical tips like that. In your sketchbook, there is a grid. And I would suggest each morning to practice doing this. Draw all of the verticals, then draw all of the horizontals, and then that in turn will form a grid. And that just gets you practicing drawing straight lines. But the grid is there for you to use as a basis for all of your drawings. And from the grid, you can actually start to scale your drawings. If one of these squares is 2 meters, and that's a scale of 1 to 200, a lot of you will be drawing at 1 to 100 and 1 to 50. So 10 of these squares is equal to 10 meters, because we'd like your drawings to be to scale. Because the more you understand scale, you can understand the spatial relationships in the city. And using scale and proportion means that you don't get an image like you have on the left, and it's more like the image on the right. So in terms of how to start your drawing, sometimes you just have a blank page and it's kind of quite confronting, especially when you see lots of things to look at. Where do you even start? Again, sort of lots of things to look at. Where do you even start in both the Sydney and the Phnom Penh context? What I would suggest doing first of all is doing a little bit of mathematics. Because we'd like all the drawings to scale, you need to sort of actually work out how big things are. How big is the facade that you're looking at? How high is it? How wide is it? How wide is the footpath? How wide is a door? All those sorts of things. How high is the awning? How wide is the awning? So there are various ways that you can do that. What I would suggest, and it's a little bit tricky, it's a shame that we can't sort of do this firsthand because we're all online. Get a tape measure and put it down as a meter and just stride along that tape measure and use that as a measuring device when you're on site. You don't have to be measuring everything on site with a tape measure. We're not asking for that. We just need rough dimensions, proportion dimensions. So you can actually use your stride to pace out the size of footpaths, or the size of a building, or size of the base of a shop front, for example. You can also, if we know the size of a door, when you're sketching, you can hold up your pen like this, and you can kind of go, well, if my pen top is the same height as the door, you can then sort of work out the height of this building, for example, and the width of this building. And you can kind of go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 doors is the height of that building roughly. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is the width of that building. Again, we're not asking for incredibly technical drawings. They just need to be roughly correct. But we'd like to encourage to invest a bit of time in actually getting this right. If you spend a bit of time in getting this right, then when you start to do all of your other drawings, they will also be right as well. If you do the first drawing not quite right, then all of the others will be not so quite right as well. Just even like this situation here, just by knowing the height of a door relative to the height of a person, you can sort of start to work out how high this canopy is and start to work out the width of this footpath. So that's what I'd recommend when you're on site to facilitate you to understand the size of things. I guess especially for the facades group as well, because you might have to cover a little bit more ground in terms of looking at above street level. And then what I'd do first of all in your sketchbook is like once you've done these little rough sketches that are all about sizes and proportions more than anything else, start to pencil in the main lines of whatever it is. I'm just using a facade here as an example. You could do the same with the plan, do the same with just a site elevation or a section. And then you can just pen in the pencil lines. And then that means that you end up with the real sort of simple drawing process. So use the pencil as your friend, as a tool to help you. Use the grid in your sketchbook to help you in doing this work. Okay, what time are we on, Vera, please?
Sorry, Richard, I'm just checking. For 10, once you're done with that, we're doing the drawing demo and the layers of place.
That's right, yeah. So
Yes.
are we 10?
Yeah, we're actually on time, 5 minutes early.
Okay, great, thank you. I just can't see my time because of full screen. Okay, so hopefully that just gives you a bit of an idea about how to approach drawing on location, a few tips and a few tools. I think in the next week or so, watch out for a few videos that will appear on Miro. just to help you in terms of giving you a few more tips and a few more tools about drawing in the street. Watch this space. So on Tuesday, we talked quite briefly about layers of place. And we categorized these layers into 4 different parts. The first part was what we believe to be and what we term as planned parts of what we see. The second part are modifications made by users. The third part is like, who are the users? What's the demographic of the people in the street? And then the fourth one is like, well, what are the activities? What are the people actually doing in the street? When we put all of these layers together, you really start to form a picture of place. And there's lots of ways that these layers kind of overlap, and some are a little bit more obvious than others. But we're just going to run through a bit of an activity and an exercise that will just sort of start you to get you thinking about these layers. And if you could keep these layers in mind when you're in the street, on location, doing your drawings, then that would be really beneficial. So layer 1, the planned parts of what you see. Again, we're just using elevations just as an example here. You can apply this to plans and in sections as well. So when you think about the planned elements, you think about, well, what are the original designed and built elements of what you see? Is it a building? Is it an object? Is it infrastructure? Is it signage? Is it landscape or is it system? And usually these elements of what have been sort of designed or built by top down. So from government organizations, from councils, from private organizations. And we're more interested in how users of the street from bottom up have actually integrated themselves into be part of the street life. And here's an example of a very simple elevation, the planned components. We actually had quite a discussion, I remember, with a student about whether seat benches in the Sydney context were planned or not planned. And if they were put there by council, like the government essentially, then they formed part of the planned layer. The modifications. So this is like, for example, some of the awnings that Vera was showing examples of in Phnom Penh, like their modifications. They've been put there by users. Vera, I'm just thinking about that example you showed of that building that had the original facade and was up next to the street corner, but then people came along and just started adding awnings. So that's an example of a modification. So, and it could be anything that's been done by a user to make their life better, whether it be from a commercial point of view to enhance the visibility of their shop, or whether it be putting an awning down to ensure that the afternoon sun doesn't make the shop a very hot space internally. Signage as well is always an obvious modification that's made by users. So imagine that there's a base building that was there from a long time ago, and people just come and add things to it over time. And then maybe when they move out of their shop or out of their home, then other people come along and there's all these layers that have added to the planned original base building. So these modified elements are known as the informal and bottom-up and user-generated. Again, here's a past example of another student really thinking about sort of, well, this person in this shop here painted it purple because they wanted to highlight that that was their shop. Okay, so that's planned and modification. Now, activities is all about, well, what are people actually doing on the street? And what elements allow them to do whatever they are doing? For example, here, if this table wasn't here, then no one would be able to put something on the table, no one would be able to sit on the table. If this umbrella wasn't here, then maybe none of these elements underneath the umbrella would be here. So these activities are known as actions and usages and functions. And these are just usually sprinkled all around the street. And usually where these activities occur is when you have street life, because the people are doing things. It's not a street where there's nothing happening whatsoever. It's certainly at street level. As I mentioned, the facade sort of groups are the face of the city. The facade happens at street level, but also above as well. So we'd encourage you to look up as well as look at street level. Here's another example from a previous student. Again, just focusing on the umbrellas. The umbrellas are the elements that someone's placed there. That means that all these ice boxes can sit there and be shaded. Now, the users are the people of the street, and they might be interacting with the threshold, with the elements that afford that allow the activities to occur. But they're the users are the people, the heartbeat of the street. So they might be sort of gathering in groups. They might be in sort of more smaller groups of 2 people or 4 people, whatever it is. These days, who knows what everyone's doing in terms of gathering with groups. But you can start to think crudely about the age of the users of the street. If it's a street corner and they're predominantly younger people, then maybe there's an element of play. If there's predominantly an older group of people, maybe there's an element of sitting and watching. So you can sort of start to see how even just the age can influence the actions and the activities that might occur. And the behavior, what are people actually doing? Are they moving very quickly from one space to another, or are they lingering and stopping, thinking about some of the William White sort of ideas and observations that came through in that video that hopefully you've all watched? So there's many categories beyond all of these. We just put these there as a starting point, but you might find on your site lots of different layers. Here's another example of a previous student. So they were focused on age. So all of these layers overlap. I mean, just even with this sketch here, just how someone, I know they don't have a body, but that circle there is someone with a hat, and that maybe sort of starts to talk about a demographic and an age. Whereas people sat here sitting down, people sat here sitting down. But the tables, if those tables weren't there, then people won't be sitting down. If that chair wasn't there, people wouldn't be sitting down. If that tree wasn't there, people might not be sitting in that particular location. If that awning wasn't there, then maybe none of this will happen there whatsoever. So you can kind of see how there's lots of overlapping of all of these layers throughout all of the themes. And even when myself and Vera were putting together the images for the little presentation we did beforehand, it was very apparent that there was lots and lots of layers and overlapping. Sometimes one image represented 4 themes or 5 themes. Sometimes it was just one. So try and think of it, there's no sort of real definition between, or the face of a city is just this and the thresholds is just this. There's lots of overlapping of all of these elements, these layers, but also the themes as well. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a good indication. So hopefully everyone has printed out this little drawing here. Has everyone printed that out? There was a link sent on Facebook.
Yes.
Great, thank you. If you don't have it for some reason, just draw this out in your sketchbook roughly, because it's not so much about the drawing that you're going to do, it's more about the process. So I'm just going to stop sharing. So we're just going to do a little activity now. And I'm just going to share Miro. Where I'd like you to all go on Miro, on the street observation page, is down here. Activity, drawing the layers of place. Can everyone sort of see below all of the boards? Down here. I can see everyone's cursors. So if everyone could have a look at all of this. So using your printed out version of your base elevation, let's have a discussion about what you think is planned and what's unplanned, and we can, it's very easy to move text, by the way. What's planned and what's unplanned, what's a user modification. I'll get my terminology right. It's actually modification. Let's forget the unplanned. So it's layer 1 is planned, layer 2, modification, layer 3, activities, layer 4, users. Okay, so with this elevation here, can anyone just put in the chats, or happy for you to maybe actually put post-it notes on here. What do you think are the user modifications? What are the user modifications on this elevation? Awning. There's different types of awnings as well. Signage. Planter box, yes. The interesting thing is, and this relates to some of the images that Vera had as well, is that I'm sorry, I'm just going to draw here. Actually, I'll just draw. There's actually different types of awnings. There's awning type 1, there's awning type 2, there's awning type 3, there's awning type, or awning or sun protection type 4. So there's lots of things there. Just even with awnings. What else? We've got advertisements, planter boxes, curtains, planters, that's right, glass windows. That's interesting. Just even with this elevation here, you can see how this is different from this. And even this is different, and even that's different. So you can kind of see how like people have actually amended these original openings in different ways. And there's a big sort of service kind of ducts here because that what's below is a restaurant. TV antennas, balcony handrails. Okay, that's great. So what I'd like you to do now, I'd like you to just look at this elevation, and I'm just going to stop sharing that. And I'd like you to draw along. So I'm going to share. Okay, can everyone see that? So this is the base elevation that you all should have printed out and is of this building here. So what I'm going to do, I've got some tracing paper here. And this is how I'd sort of suggest that you do it in your sketchbook. So imagine that this is in my sketchbook. Just move that out of the way. And I'm just going to use a different color just for the purpose of this exercise. So what did we say? We said that awnings were a user modification. So, and also signage. So when I look here, there's like this sort of big kind of sign here where it says cafe. So I'm going to draw in that element there. And then also it goes around the corner like that. And you can draw along with this, or you can watch. It's up to you how you want to do it. So that's the awning. And then the awning actually kind of comes out like this. I'm actually going to use a thicker pen. So this is signage. That's signage as well. And this is the awning. That kind of comes down like that. So that's this part here. And then there's like a little sort of vertical part to it as well. And just as I mentioned before, if you've done the hard work of actually calculating the height of this, so if you've done the hard work of actually going, well, that dimension, and again, roughly, we're not doing measured drawings from a technical point of view, and the height of and the width of that, if you get X and Y roughly about right, all of this falls into place. If you get sort of X, and if X is more sort of like that and Y is like that, then you're going to come into a bit of trouble from a proportion point of view. So we've got some different types of awnings. So we've also got another awning here, which is this one here. And then we've got another awning here. So I'm going to fill that in as well. And then we've got another awning here. But that has, as you can see, sort of here, it has like a drop down awning, a vertical part, which sort of comes down like that. So you can kind of start to see how I'm layering things up. Now, what were the other things that people mentioned as well? Let's have a look. Balcony handrails, glass windows. Okay, so let's have a look at this one here. The handrail is 1 meter high. So again, if you've worked out this proportion, you know that the handrail isn't up here and it's not down here. It's roughly about here. And then we have 2 simple windows like this. And that starts to become this part of the elevation. This one here is a little bit different. It's almost like, this is the interesting thing. The more you look, the more you start to question what happened there, and the more you start to understand. So the same height as this is a filled in balcony. And then they've got windows above that that are different from these. These windows are pushed back, these windows are brought forward. And again, just using that idea of shapes, divide into, and that sort of becomes that window there. And then this window here is different as well, in that they have glass down here, and that's divided in two, so 1, 2, and then that's the same height as that, this bit and this bit, down there, and then they've got one there, and they've got what? Yeah, 1, 2, 3 sections. Okay. Now, is anyone drawing along to this, or are you all just watching? Hopefully it's all making sense.
There's some people drawing along.
That's good. Thank you. Okay, what else did we have? We had planter box. Now that's an interesting one. So the planter box just right here. So we've got planter box there, planter box there. Now, just as a question, just to put it out there, like, is a planter box something that it affords an activity, or is a planter box a planned element? What do you think?
It's a more of a plant element. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it can be both. In looking at different sites in the last couple of days, I saw some that were put there by the council, and they tended to be more substantial, bigger concrete structures, for instance, and some that were more local or street life, in the sense they looked like they had been put there by the shop owners rather than the council.
Yeah, that's a really good point. This is a really good example of how things overlap. You know, just even those layers that we talked about previously, how a planter box can be a planned element, but it also can be a user put there by a user. So therefore, it's more of it's facilitating an activity, and especially if the planter box is sized in a way that it actually allows people to sit next to the planter box. So I would kind of suggest that there's the idea to approach these ambiguities, if you like, or areas where it's not so obvious what things are, is just ask the question, where did this come from? Who put this there? Was it a user? Was it a shop owner? Was it someone from the street? Was it a family? Or was it something more sort of official? So planter boxes can be a bit of both. Okay, what else do we have? What else do you think is planned? What else needs to go on this drawing? Colors. Someone put colors, and I think that's a really good point. So when I look at this one here, that's got these two bands kind of running across like this. And then it's got this part there. And sometimes, you know, people like to color their own properties. It might be from a commercial reason. It might be from an identity reason. All sorts of reasons why people paint their buildings in various ways. Maybe, you know, the previous student example that I showed you, there was a shop there that painted it. It was painted bright purple, and that's because they wanted to attract attention. So little sort of details like that are sort of something that, again, the more that you look, the more you ask questions. Why is that like that? Why, who's done that? Then the more you can sort of start to understand the street life. And interestingly, and I don't know why, but this one here, there's this one on the, they've painted everything white. And I wonder why that is. You know, why is that white? Why is it, this sort of continues along here? And this continues along here. Okay, another element that someone mentioned were TV antennas. So just simple drawing like this. 2 lines, just need to be 2 lines. Just to maybe a few little lines like this, just so we know what it is. This is also interesting as well here. This is a completely different, very detailed, very ornate balcony. And the way to draw, you know, something that's really sort of super detailed, this, you could just sort of draw this balcony, just sort of like, you know, by really sort of simplifying. What do you kind of see? I mean, you know, like the next part is like this. I mean, that's the balcony. We don't have to draw every like little thing, every little detail in here. You just need to draw the main parts to it. Okay, so let's move on to what we think the, I've got another piece of trace here. What do we think, and do this in the same way, put your post-it notes next to that elevation. What do we think are the activities occurring? What's actually happening on this street? Put them in maybe a different color post-it note, maybe on a green post-it note.
I'm surprised nobody noticed the big chimney.
Oh, someone did. Oh, did they actually?
Really?
Advertisements, shop window, colors. Okay, shopping. Someone got shopping. There's a few images to the right-hand side that just sort of zoom in a little bit, so hopefully that will help you. Okay, so we got shopping. What else have we got? I'm going to use a different color for this. Green. Sitting. Dining. Crossing. Okay, so whilst it's kind of not on this image here, it's on one of the images here. You can kind of see that this cafe normally has sort of chairs and tables out of it. So then you'd put Hang on, I'm gonna do this in a different color. Do some orange. So you'd have a table like that, and then you'd have chairs, even the sort of like stools like this. Waiting for the bus. So these are the chairs and the tables are the elements that afford activities to occur. And then if we think about, well, who are the users? Maybe there's someone sat here and there's someone sat here. As I mentioned, maybe there's someone sat next to the planter box. Maybe they're wearing a hat because they're not in the shade and these guys are in the shade. So you can sort of start to see like even little details about what people are wearing starts to tell the story about their environment. Walking. So in terms of drawing people, just to give you a tip, just a head like that. And a body like that. That's it. That's just a simple way to, I think my battery's going to run out. A simple way to draw people. Not quite sort of stick people, but they don't need to be detailed. So all of the activities that people are doing, smoking. So how do we draw someone at this scale that someone's smoking? It's kind of quite tricky. And then, but also you've got to think about, well, someone put their rubbish. Okay, so rubbish is the right one, and that's sort of, there's a bin here. So that is an element that affords or generates a certain type of activity. And then people, so people are red, activities are orange. They might sort of go and put something in that bin like that. So users wise, so users and activities sort of kind of go tandem, kind of go hand in hand. You know, if we think about this diagram here, users and activities, they sort of really go together. So what I would suggest is that you sort of organize the planned and the modifications made. That's sort of the more simpler sort of way of approaching what you see in terms of your exercises and observations. And then the users and activities always sort of go hand in hand. So you, for example, you've got drinking coffee, but to drink coffee, you need to be sat down on something normally, or it depends if they're stood up. So again, the seating is something that affords the activity, something that allows the activity to occur. If there wasn't the seat, would people be drinking coffee there? Not too sure. So hopefully that sort of gives you an idea of like some of the layers and how they sort of cross over from each other. Oh, my computer's run out of battery. There you go. That's all the reason for drawing by hand. Now, is everyone, I'm just going to stop sharing that for 1 second. Has everyone been drawing along with that? Or is everyone watching? Any questions from that process? No questions?
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about using the trace paper and the different layers? Like how,
Yeah. Sorry, go Nick.
Oh, just so if I end up with a little, my camera's too crap, but I've now got a little layer with some people on it and another layer with some horizontal lines and stuff. So how do you use them later on?
Sure, I think the best way to do that is the only reason I'm using trace in this way is just to demonstrate the different layers. Like if, for example, and the only reason I'm using different colors is to demonstrate the different layers. If
Okay.
you look at some of the examples, and I'll share my screen here, some examples from the previous sort of students, they all used just, look at this one here, they all used just black pen. So the idea of just the tracing and just the different colored pens at this stage is just to encourage you to think about all of these different elements and how they go together in different parts.
Yeah. So thinking about the different layers, but it's not necessarily an advantage towards your kind of more final drawings. In a final drawing, you're more likely to have it all just on the one sheet of paper.
Exactly. I guess with the tracing paper option, it gives you, you know, if you might have spent a really long time in doing like a sketch in the sketchbook. I mean, if you weren't using tracing, I mean, you just didn't really think, you hadn't thought properly and decided exactly what you were going to do.
Yeah.
And then you went and did your drawing over the top of that, then you're going to have to redraw it again. So the idea is using the trace just starts to give you a little bit of leeway to sort of think about what you actually need to show.
Yep.
And, you know, as we spoke about on Tuesday, people who invariably do well in this course, people who just draw and draw and draw and practice and practice. It's not just one drawing, you just do it and there it is. You might draw the same elevation 6 times before you get it how it needs to be for your observations or plan or something like that.
I'd just like to add, the tracing paper part of the process, it's more of a studying and observational piece where you just, you know, start to see different things and start categorizing different things in there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Exactly. Yeah, it's more of a, you don't have to use tracing paper at all. You could fill the sketchbook with amazing sketches just done straight onto the paper. I guess we're just, it's just another tool or another option for you to develop your ideas. Okay. Any other questions? We've got 20 minutes left on this session. There's a couple of things that we could do. One is I could show you how to draw certain things if you wanted to, whether it be a tree, a bike, using this idea of like simplified drawing. Or I'm more than happy for you to just go through that little exercise and use the planned elevation and start to work out what modifications, what the users are, what the activities are. Over to you. What would you like? I can do either.
I think a more detailed outlook on how to draw human activities is I think it would be nice to see some sort of other examples too.
Okay. All right. Let's do that for 20 minutes or so. Thank you. So I'm just going to share. Okay. So let's put that over there. One thing that, and as simple as it sounds, one thing that I always use as a bit of a reference is a milk crate. I often sort of think about a building is like a milk crate. It's just a series of shapes that's just broken down into different sizes. So if you think about a milk crate in terms of this elevation here, so we're just going to flatten it, then we kind of know roughly it's square, and it's got 3 parts to it. And you know there's a central sort of area that sort of comes down like that. And then that goes like that. And then that goes like that. And then that's split into 2. And then there's a border around that. So you can kind of see how, all right, plants, different types of objects, trees, plants, people, hedges, bike, scooter. All right, so for people especially doing the thresholds theme, and also fences, and also facades, keep the milk crate idea in mind. When you might see really quite a complicated facade, but break it down into shapes. Do the larger shape first, make sure that dimension and that dimension is what it needs to be proportionally, and then all of this will work and fall into place. So what have we got? We've got trees. Okay, so a tree in plan, you could do a circle like that, and then I do a secondary circle. And you might have different sizes, and maybe there's a plant like this. So that's in plan. In section or elevation, people in the biocity, this would be important, like what type of tree is it? You know, there's different types of trees that afford different types of shade, different types of canopies, linked more with sacred elements as well. So with a tree, I just do 2 loops like that, and then maybe there's plant down like at the bottom there. Also another way of drawing a tree is to sort of have the branches like this. They almost look like people in a way. Hang on 1 second, I'm running out of paper. So that's some trees. What else have we got? So imagine you've got a planter box like that, and maybe there's some kind of banana leaves like that, and here there's some smaller leaves. So you just keep it really kind of simple. That's the curb there. And then someone was asking about so drawing people. So imagine if someone's watering the plants, that's their arm. Maybe they're wearing a hat. So that's how you just draw someone watering some plants. So the way I draw people, just very simple. You can have they just need to be like this. They don't need to be so detailed. I guess my technique, I use sort of continuous line drawing, but again, you don't have to use that technique. That's just something that I do. Different types of objects, chairs. So I imagine like there's mainly in the Sydney context, in section, you might have a bench like that. And if you wanted to sort of put that into sort of 3D, That's actually a good tip, actually. If you ever want to do a 3D object, draw it in section first, and then, and again, it's not a technical drawing, it's just a sketch. And then you can draw people sat down talking to someone else. Hedges. I guess hedges, just keep them sort of simple like that. You could sort of maybe dash, do dots. Oh, sorry, can't see that. You could do dots like that. Something like that. What else? Keep putting things in the chat and I'll just draw. Bikes and scooters. So a bike in elevation, circle, circle. This is a push bike. And the seat, the handlebars. And then so that's a bike. Sky. Well, graphically, if this was the sky, I draw the sky by just little dashes like this. But technically, you only need to draw the sky if, for example, if this was an umbrella here, and what you're trying to say is that when it's raining, this umbrella means that people stop here next to this little green patch, then you could draw rain like this, dots. Maybe you don't draw a cloud, but you could just sort of draw rain like that. And then that how makes it a nicer sort of space if there's like another umbrella there.
Some examples of some scooters and cars would help, Richard.
Okay. It's like draw on demand. It's cool. Scooters. Now let me just think about this. I've drawn a few scooters. So you got a little wheel, then the body of the scooter, and then the handlebars. There's the light. Maybe there's a seat. And then a bigger. Sorry, that's actually a really bad drawing. It's sort of going uphill. Let me do that again. I'm not happy with that. So wheel, exhaust, seat, and then kind of all of the bits that sort of happening there. And then handlebars, light, ground, wheel, something like that. Number plate. So that's in elevation. In plan, maybe all you need to draw is the seat. handlebars, and then the light. And that's the exhaust. Like that. So that's in plan, that's in elevation. I mean, I guess sort of front sort of view.
Artist Richard Briggs in action, everybody.
Like that. Okay, anything else? People
Hot
dancing.
trucks, people are putting and people dancing.
Oh wow, people dancing.
Must be very lively street.
Cars. All right, so cars. Cars is a simple one. And there's examples of this in the sketchbook, but you sort of just it from the front elevation. Light kind of comes down like that. Wheel on it. Mirror, like that. So from the front, like that. From the top, if you draw it in plan, you have the top of the car, and then windscreen, and then rear. Just like that. Mirror. Bonnet of the car. Just as simple as that. So that's in plan. That's in elevation. So you keep
Richard,
cars really simple. Yep.
Yeah, people want some example of shrines or sacred objects.
Oh, okay. With my limited knowledge of spirit houses, I guess I'm trying to think of some of the images that you showed, Vera, but it's something like this. And then it's like a little and then whatever's in here. Sorry, I'm doing a really bad job of that one because I'm going completely off memory. And this is the good thing about drawing on location is that you are there in front of whatever you're drawing. So it's a lot easier to draw because you can study it. Animal. Okay, what sort of animal? A dog?
Chickens, maybe.
Chickens, okay. So it's a dog. Chickens.
The key takeaway from these type of drawings is just keeping it simple with some basic shapes. You don't really have to go into detail or copy Richard's style of drawing.
Exactly.
So you just need to capture the essence of it.
Because you remember, like, all of your drawings. So all of your drawings will be made up of many of these different elements potentially. So there might be a scooter, there might be a car, there might be a shrine, there might be a dog, there might be a chicken, there might be people sat down. So that's why if you keep it really sort of simple, it makes the drawing a lot easier to read. As soon as you start to add like all this detail in here, then it sort of starts to become a little bit different. Vera, Sophia wants me to draw a cat. Are you okay with that?
Don't really need to. It's similar to the one you just drew.
Yeah, I mean, like what else? It's sort of a tail.
Okay, so just want to remind the Rufus students, I know you guys are not really used to these kind of drawings, and you're really just used to some detailed drawings, but in this course, like I said, you just really need to keep it very, very simple, just similar to Rich's drawings. You don't, please stay away from drawing too much and just sort of focus on what the theme requires you to draw. Instead of, say, if you're drawing fences, then you don't really need to put into great detail of the building that's behind. So you just need to draw some of the fences in front, and also keeping that fence simple.
That's a good point, Vera, because so if for the fences group, for example, part of the exercise is that we are interested in the detail and the materials of the fence, like for some of the examples that Vera showed, it's like sort of, is there a material here? But then, the elevation behind, if there's a building behind like this, you don't need to draw like every single, if there's a balcony, you don't need to draw every single line like this, because that detracts from this. You would just sort of keep a basic outline. Maybe you wouldn't even show any windows. You just draw the actual outline to show the relationship between this and this spatially.
Exactly.
So really keep in mind, when you are drawing, keep in mind what is the focus, which I guess some of the examples I showed at the beginning of this session were like, the more you think about, well, what is the main part of this drawing? What does it need to be? Spend time on getting that right, and everything else can be pared back. Yeah, Lino.
Yeah, just want to quickly add. Yeah, this is exactly like Richard and Vera just mentioned. You don't need to draw everything, but anything that you draw matters. So remember that what you draw, think about what information are you telling, right? So any element that you draw matters. So choose that strategically into the story you are telling.
Yeah, exactly. That's great.
Definitely.
That's a great point. And it's very easy to overcomplicate the drawings. And also remember, these drawings are going to be very, very small on your observation cards. Your observation cards are A5 in size. So whilst your drawings in your sketchbooks will be A4 size and a little bit larger, these components, people on bikes or what are people walking, will be very, very small. So the more simple they are graphically, how you draw them, the better.
And also be patient with the process. Sometimes it doesn't take one take to get the drawings right. You might have to redraw a few times, but that's, it's counted as practice for you. So it's okay if you don't make it in one go.
Yeah, I mean, like some of those drawings I will, I'm like, I'll never do again like that. But yeah, keep practicing. And that's why there's lots of pages in your sketchbook. And just to emphasize, like Vera mentioned, Vera's done the course. So, Vera's been there and gone through the process and experienced that, which is invaluable to have. That insight is that the first drawing you do, you won't get it right. You got to keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it. And if that means you use tracing paper, fine. If that means you don't use tracing paper, that's okay too. All right, so we're right on time.
We're gonna take a 15-minute break, and then we'll be back for the Pechakucha presentations.
Please be ready when you come. Be sure that you your order of presentation, have your file ready, and who will command the presentation for your group. Yes.
Vera, just a logistical thing. Are we all coming back to the main group and then we go to the breakout rooms?
I've already assigned a few of them to the breakout rooms. So then after that, we'll come back to the main room. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, to
after-
main room first and then to breakout. Right?
Yes,
Once
okay.
everyone convenes.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. All right. So 15-minute break. So back here, 3:15 Sydney time.